C'è la finale sopra?
Sì, questo.
Comunque,
È muto.
ecco. Signore signori, please take your seats. We are about to start the conference.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Dear participants, it's fantastic to see such a full room. And I would like to open the meeting, and on behalf of Business at OECD, BIAC, I'm very honored and very pleased to welcome you all to our Zero Corruption Forum, which we are particularly pleased to organize in the beautiful city of Rome, and even the sun is coming back, here at LUMSA University, a place known for academic excellence and exchange of views. And exchange of views is so important to us. We are very pleased to welcome high-level representatives of the Italian government and our OECD colleagues and friends. Our Italian member organizations, Confindustria, Assonime, FEBAF, and their member companies, and we are happy to have high-level representation from business here. Members of our Global Anti-Corruption Committee from across OECD countries and beyond. Key stakeholders who are actively contributing to the integrity debate, as well as some students from the university. And let me just say, this is important as the fight against corruption concerns all of us, and we need to spread the message early on. To start with, I would like to express our sincere thanks to Nicola Allocca, Chair of our Anti-Corruption Committee, for making today's event possible, for his fantastic leadership of our committee, and making sure that our messages get the visibility they deserve at the highest level in the OECD. Let me just underline that Business at OECD, which is the officially recognized business voice to the OECD, has worked with the organization as a trusted partner for over 60 years, underlining the conditions that must be in place for the private sector to create jobs, address global challenges, and contribute to sustainable growth and development. And it is in this context that we have consistently underlined the importance of a corruption-free business environment, which is not only an absolute must for ethical considerations, but also fundamental for sustainable growth, a global level playing field, and our long-term competitiveness. And we are now at a crucial moment in time for boosting our efforts to fight corruption jointly. First, the OECD is celebrating the 25th anniversary of its Anti-Bribery Convention, which has established the OECD as a leading international organization in the fight against corruption, and we are very proud to be a partner in these efforts. This anniversary presents a key opportunity to ensure that the convention is effectively implemented in all adherent countries and to foster additional coherence to make its reach as global as possible. The anniversary also presents an opportunity for the OECD to expand its program to work to take a fully horizontal approach in the fight against corruption, addressing the supply side and the demand side of bribery, action in the private and the public sectors, setting the right tone from the top, that's crucially important, and fostering partnerships so that we work all together. Second, we need to take stock of where we stand with regard to the Sustainable Development Goals. Unfortunately, global progress on the SDGs is not on track, and we are witnessing an increasing sustainable investment gap at the midpoint of the 2030 agenda. But we simply cannot afford that corruption keeps diverting the limited resources we have. This is what we have highlighted in our Business at OECD Zero Corruption Manifesto. You found the copies outside, which calls for making the fight against corruption an integral part of the SDG agenda. For these reasons, we are very pleased and honored to launch today our Business at OECD Zero Corruption Campaign. Our campaign, which has benefited from the contributions from a range of our members, showcases concrete actions that the business community around the world is taking to fight corruption. It also provides an important platform to exchange information about best practices and useful tools, and provides concrete input to the OECD's Global Integrity Agenda. We invite you all to visit our campaign website through the QR code, which you all received at the entrance. Let me just underline that it is a living website, and we very much look forward to receiving additional contributions throughout the year. Let me also underline that in addition to our active dialogue with the OECD, we will also highlight our messages loud and clearly through our involvement as network partners in the B7 and the B20. And in this respect, we are very pleased that Nicola Allocca is also co-chair of the B20 Task Force on Integrity and Compliance. Now, today's meeting is an important step to foster dialogue and to bring additional momentum in our joint efforts to foster integrity. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers. Thank you very much for joining us today. And we encourage you all to participate actively during the discussion time. So thank you very much again to all of you for joining today's meeting, contributing to our efforts throughout the year. And let me now hand over to our moderator, John Hooper.
Thank you, Hani. I am here as the moderator of your conference today. I am the economists correspondent for Italy and also for the Vatican, but more pertinent to the current proceedings, perhaps is the fact that I am also the economist's specialist writer on transnational organized crime. And I will be, for the most part, asking questions in this debate, in this discussion, not participating in any way. But I will just say this at the beginning, that corruption, from my standpoint, is lethal. It causes people to die. It causes companies to go bankrupt. It causes people to be tortured. And I think that that is worth bearing in mind as we proceed with today's conference. With no more ado, I would like to hand over to the first of our keynote speakers, Paola Severino, who is former Minister of Justice, as I'm sure you all know, of Italy, and is, in addition, now the chair of the Scuola Nazionale dell'Amministrazione. Paola will be talking on her wide experience of the subjects under discussion here, and particularly on what can be termed the demand side of corruption. Paola.
Good morning. Let me begin thanking the business at OECD and all the authorities present today for inviting me to deliver this keynote speech on a topic I am particularly passionate about: the fight against corruption and the role that governments, private sector, and civil society cooperatively can play in combating this hideous criminal offense. Indeed, as I have always stressed in my institutional activity, I firmly believe that the fight against corruption must be based on three pillars: prevention, repression, and last but not least, the culture of integrity. And this is the key point of my interview. It goes without saying that citizens' awareness, civic culture, and social responsibility play a crucial role. Over the years, public decision makers have introduced a number of measures to prevent corruption in the public and private sector. Regrettably, both public administration and private companies often consider such measures as a burden or as pointless bureaucratic obligations that become an obstacle both to a more efficient public administration on the one hand and to entrepreneurial development on the other. And this is totally wrong. In my experience, this is due both to public governance miscommunication and to communities' cultural attitudes toward these policies. It is therefore essential to promote a change in society's approach to these instruments and to the reforms introduced at international level in recent years, since they will inevitably take time to fully prove their strengths and to be absorbed by the economic world. In order to make this change happen, we need to raise awareness in the whole society on the importance of fighting corruption and illegality in the public sector and in the economy, starting from the young generations and throughout a multi-level approach. Indeed, youth in every country can prove to be an effective voice against corruption. Key to youth engagement in anti-corruption is education on the topic. Teaching children about integrity from any early age at school can help establish behavioral norms and values for society. And the comparison between countries prove that this is a fundamental aspect. Universities that integrate content on anti-corruption can help equip citizens and future leaders with the knowledge and the skills to avoid corrupt practice. Finally, companies, public authorities, and other organizations can promote and reinforce a culture of integrity and spread best practice on preventing corruption throughout specific training modules. And I am happy because today we will have a lot of important companies, Italian and international companies, magistrates, judges, public officials to share their ideas about the fight against corruption, because altogether we have to fight this heavy phenomenon. I have dedicated my whole life to spreading the culture of integrity and transparency throughout the said multi-level approach. And the multi-level approach is today the key point of our meeting. First, in the academic field, as university professor and as president of the School of Law at Lewis University, I promoted the Legality and Merit project with the idea that the dialogue between young people, Lewis students acting as student ambassador of legality, and I speak about Lewis in LUMSA, and this is not something strange for me, because I think that the cooperation between university is fundamental, and if LUMSA will be with us in this kind of a project, we will be happy to share with them our ideas. So I was speaking about Lewis students acting as student ambassadors of legality, and other young people in high schools and juvenile prisons on the themes of legality and merit can stimulate the awareness of the younger generations on the importance of respecting the rules and creating moments of collective cultural growth. The project aims at raising awareness among new generations on issues of justice, legality, and merit, and provides concrete tools as an alternative to the shortcuts of crime. When I was rector of my university, I also introduced a specific postgraduate master, LLM, in compliance and corruption prevention in the public and private sector. I put always together the public and the private sector. A course now is in the 7th edition, reflecting the continuing public and professional attention to these issues. And many Italian universities do the same. When I had the privilege of being the Italian Minister of Justice, I paid special attention to the fight against corruption, promoting an anti-corruption reform that focuses not only on the repressive side, but also on the preventive one, including the creation of an independent anti-corruption authority, which is very well known in Italy, the ANAC, the Anti-Corruption Authority, and the obligation for public institutions to develop periodic anti-corruption plans tailored for their specific needs and characteristics. The tailor-made projects for the companies are very, very important. And I think it is worth mentioning here that the recently proposed European Anti-Corruption Directive also addresses both the preventive and the repressive side. I also had the honor of being appointed special representative of the OSCE chairperson in office on combating corruption from 2018 to 2020 under the presidency of Italy, Slovakia, and Albania. By serving the organization for 3 years, I have come to the conclusion that the OSCE has, I say OSCE, which is an Italian sound, but obviously you can declinate as OECD, it is the same. That the OSCE has a unique role to play in the international struggle against corruption. Last but not least, in my capacity as president of the National School of Administration, I am very proud of the huge work in raising awareness and strengthening integrity culture among civil servants. For instance, the community of practice of anti-corruption officers realized under the 5th National Action Plan of Open Government Partnership Italy serves as a remarkable model of a fruitful cooperation between public administration and civil society. Here, anti-corruption officers are viewed not merely as recipients of specialized training, but as primary catalysts for change. The dialogue between the public sector and the private economy is fundamental because they have to speak the same language in the fight against corruption. I am really honored that our efforts in this field have been recognized by the business and OECD, the BIAC, which has included in the paper Shaping the Values for a Sustainable Future, Education for the Fight Against Corruption, also the National School of Administration among the 18 international best practice. I believe that events like today's and the one that will take place in Paris by the end of March, if I am correct, as well as the effective and constant work of supranational bodies meet this very need of promoting the culture of civic awareness, legality, and transparency in our societies. In this regard, I would like to share with you principle number 4 of the OECD Zero Corruption Manifesto, stating that developing a culture of integrity, transparency, and ethics within any context, any entity, any government, any jurisdiction is vital, and express my appreciation for the recent paper on education for the fight against corruption, published last December by the BIAC to operationalize the said Principle 4 and to shed light on how companies and the public sector can leverage education in their anti-corruption efforts in practice and where they can cooperate more. Indeed, it is important to underline that the instruments put in place and at an international level to fight corruption, far from being a burden, are rather a valuable opportunity for public administrations, citizens, and business. Every public body implementing prevention protocols can contribute to triggering the virtuous process capable of making public opinion regain full confidence in the institutions, thus improving their relationship with the citizens and, above all, business. When interacting with the public administration, companies need to be assured that the key requirements of impartiality and transparency are met so as to ensure effective and fair market competition. Communication strategies need to emphasize the incentives recently put in place for companies that meet the standards of legality. We have to give this representation. This is an advantage for the private sector, for the companies to apply the prevention, the anti-corruption strategy. I try to be short now. In conclusion, public administrations, private companies, and citizens can become key actors in combating corruption. This fight cannot be successful unless prevention and repression measures are accompanied by a commonly shared culture of integrity, obviously, not only in Italy. I think that the international framework has to cooperate, the European framework, and not only the European, the international framework has to elaborate common rules. Because the money goes through the borders, and so we have to fight corruption all together, also on the international sector. This means by using the words of a great magistrate from the pool of Tangentopoli, Gerardo Colombo, a common understanding of the rules, because rules are observed not out of fear of punishment, but out of sharing. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Paola. We have a change of program because Davide Bergami has been taken ill, and in his place, Giovanni Tartaglia Polcini will be giving our second keynote address. Giovanni is a magistrate of long experience, and particularly in the field of fighting corruption. And he is also the chair of the G7's Anti-Corruption Working Group. Giovanni.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you to the Business at OECD for the organization of this important seminar, and also for the involvement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. I bring you greetings from Councillor Davide Bergami, who will be unable to attend due to an impediment. An essential factor for economic growth and equality is promotion and protection of market competition. This not only aligns with market principles, but can also contribute to enhance social justice. In this spirit, we consistently witness a fruitful and productive convergence of legal diplomacy and growth diplomacy, firmly cultivated by the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs over time. This commitment can be manifested in various and consistent ways. I will mention a few that are particularly exemplary of the seriousness of this action. First, for example, in the framework of our National Recovery and Resilience Plan, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation assumes the central role in overseeing the implementation of a significant measure involving the refinancing and redefinition of Fund 394, managed by CIMEST, which operates a revolving fund for offering low-interest loans to Italian companies engaged in foreign markets. In particular, the collaboration with CIMEST, which was started at the end of 2022, took concrete form with the willingness of CIMEST to develop a permanent institutional collaboration targeted, for instance, at supporting the internationalization plans of the Italian enterprises in terms of integrity, transparency, and accountability, with a special emphasis on those financed precisely through the above-mentioned measures of National Resilience and Recovery Plan, for which MOFA serves as a central administrative authority. Furthermore, in order to raise awareness among enterprises, particularly small and medium-sized businesses operating internationally and benefiting from the above-mentioned funds, a specific attachment notice has been prepared and integrated in all relevant procedures. Indeed, The form is named Raising Awareness Among Italian Enterprises Benefiting from Internationalization Funding on the Consequences of Corruption Involving Foreign Public Officials. In taking this action, we believe we have fully implemented one of the most important OECD recommendations from the report of October 22. Alongside a continuous effort to enhance awareness within the business community, we have thus conceived and structured a special tool aimed at strengthening the awareness of those who benefit from public aid for their business. This is not intended as an additional lawful or bureaucratic burden. On the contrary, this tool is deemed to be a moment of shared values and cultural exchange, addressing the risk of corruption as well as the regulatory safeguards in place to preserve integrity. Our strong relationship between MOFA and CIMEST is further evidenced by the direct involvement of CIMEST in the International Anti-Corruption Table led by Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in which also the business at OECD is an active member. The second example, building upon the already cited OECD report from October 2022, it is important to emphasize that it mentions a noteworthy Italian best practice within this specific operational context. The report highlights as a best practice the organization of an awareness-raising initiative named Italian Business Integrity Day, IBID, held in collaboration with civil society and private sector. During these events, Italian companies operating abroad had the opportunity to present their respective strategies for preventing and combating illicit behaviors and corruption offenses, demonstrating a tangible commitment to integrity and transparency. Those presentations were held at important seminars hosted by our diplomatic missions. IBD editions have been, for instance, held in Oslo, Paris, Sao Paulo in Brazil, Washington, London, Berlin, and Bucharest since 2017 to 2022. An assessment is currently underway on these relevant and much appreciated initiatives, which in the past has registered the participation of prominent companies of the caliber of Luxottica and TIM, Enel, Terna and Riina, Eni, Leonardo, Snam, and ThyssenKrupp Acciai Speciali Terni. A distinctive feature of the IBID as a best practice in the dialogue between companies and the dynamics of the local territory and markets, combining economic objectives with ethical values, commercial performance with social engagement, in order to enhance a positive reputational perception of the business involved and consequently of our country system as a whole. Italian companies are united by the belief that investing to improve one's way of doing business, creating a culture of legality, and spreading it according to the canons of innovation and sustainability is not a cost, but a great investment opportunity for business. All in the spirit of fully comply to Goal 16 of the United Nations Agenda for Sustainable Development. On all those occasions, companies were also able to present a practical tool for small and medium-sized enterprises, the so-called Anti-Corruption Integrity Kit. Of course, this calls for proactive collaboration of SMEs, either when they are part of a supply chain governed by a global player, or when SMEs act directly as leaders in niche markets. The last example. In the past years, the Italian MOFA has also placed significant emphasis on the issue of integrity in the private sector, leveraging its prominent role within the activities of the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group. At a technical level, the G20 has given rise to a new way of operating multilateralism, defined by many as efficient, due to the extent of its ability to harmonize policies on issues that may be delicate and sensitive to deal within intergovernmental negotiations. The work of the G20 Anti-Corruption Working Group is always rich in suggestions and useful for debate and mobilization on the world's major issues. Italy chaired the forum in 2021 and co-chaired the working group in 2020 with Saudi Arabia and in 2023 with India, upon specific request of those presidencies. And in this field, we have always called for the involvement of private sector and civil society in all its components in order to make it more effective, according to a method that is even more ambitious and advanced than the so-called multi-stakeholder, which we consider occasional counterpart consultation. But we look to a new one approach. We can define multi-shareholder, the multi-shareholder approach, the best of the public sector, the best of private sector matching. Such an advance would be a projection in terms of multilateralism of the ongoing evolution and shift from government to governance. We believe in a governance of a re-globalization that has a human face, which is our signature trait and one of the most important future challenges in terms of legal diplomacy and growth diplomacy. I wish you all good work today, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Giovanni. We now pass to panel one, and I'm going to invite the speakers for panel one to come up and join me on the platform. We're very privileged to have two distinguished CEOs, Roberto Tomasi, CEO of Autostrade per l'Italia, and Davide Rota, CEO of Tiscali, as well as an expert on the field of education against corruption, and indeed the author of the report that I think that you will find in the packs that you were given at the introduction. Gaetano Morganti, Director of the Polis Institute at the University of Sant'Anna in Pisa. What I'd like to do is to start by asking both our CEOs to give a very brief picture of their businesses and the state that their businesses are in at this moment, and perhaps point to some of the areas that you regard as high risk because of the nature of your business. Roberto, perhaps you'd like to start.
Thank you to everybody to have this opportunity to share, which is our view. And I want to thank the business at OECD. I want to thank also the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. And obviously, I want to thank and to congratulate the entire team that organized this important meeting. I go through to try to explain the business of Autostrade per l'Italia. Autostrade per l'Italia is one of the major players in Europe that manage toll roads, motorways, and we are the largest in Italy. Just to give you, we are fundamental in terms of economic growth of the country in which we operate, because like the other infrastructure, energy, water, transportation, we are a key player to support the business of our country and of Europe, and if we look to a global view, to support the growth of the economy of the states. Also, in that case, I think it could be useful to understand what is an infrastructure. We move, just to give you an idea, 90% of goods and person every day, 90%. If we look to the future, we will remain to these numbers also for the next decades. And so these infrastructures still remain crucial in the next years. The motorway are the backbone of the transportation because through the motorway we pass goods and personnel that every day create value to our country. But if we look to the complexity of Autostrade per l'Italia or to our motorways, we are quite peculiar compared to the other country because we manage the most complex infrastructure in terms of intensity of traffic. Take in consideration if we make the average of the intensity of the traffic in the other motorways in Europe, we are higher 65% compared to the other, but we are also complex in terms of infrastructure. I try to explain also for that, because if we look to the number of tunnels and to the numbers of bridges and viaducts that we manage, we are far from the other country. Just to give you an idea, the 50%, 50, of the tunnels of Europe are in Italy. And if you think about bridge and viaducts, for every 100 kilometers, 14 kilometers are of bridge and viaducts against the Europe that are below 3 kilometers. We finally, to try to explain the complexity that we manage, is the age of the infrastructure, because we have the oldest infrastructure built in Europe. And if you look at more or less, we are 25 years older compared to the others. What does it mean? It means that we need, in the next years, a huge volume of investment to try to achieve 3 targets. The first one is to increase the capacity for the part of the grid that today are already saturated. This is strategic because if we are not able to support this part of the investment, we will reduce the capability to growth in the country. We have a second task, very complicated, that we have to modernize the infrastructure that today is old, maintaining the level of the services, remember, 65% higher compared to the other, and so maintaining the level of the services that today support the economy of the country. The last challenges that we have is to try to achieve the target of decarbonization foreseen by Europe. Also for that, I think that could be useful to understand the numbers. Today, Europe declare, and we have declared together with Europe, that within the 2030, so in the next 6 years, 7 years, we will reduce the impact on the CO2 emission, reducing by 42.5%. And so it's like to divide by 2 the number of emission that we are thinking. And if we look to the 2015, we are declare that we will reduce to 0. So it means that the effort in terms of investment is very important. And what it is very important, that we be very fast to change our approach to achieve this target. Today, if we look where we are very far to achieve the target that Europe declared. I try to close, and this is just to give you a summary about the complexity that we manage. I try to close to your answer. Which are the main concern? Obviously, one of the key point that we have to point in attention, that to keep this target, we have to avoid any problem of corruption, because every time that we risk to have only one problem of corruption, we lose the credibility, because we are and we move the country, and the other fact, we will delay our plan of investment. These are the key points that we have to take in mind, and there are different risks that we have to keep in mind. I point out only two major risks. One is linked with the fact that we have to assure a balance, a fair relation with our supplier and with our contractor. We have to be sure that when we assign the order pay the correct value of what we are paying. And so we need to have a balanced relation with our supplier. The other fact that we have to improve our capability to develop and to drive. I like to say that normally a company is like a car. You have to drive. To drive the car, you need the data. This is fundamental. We have developed digitalization. We have digitalized the 75% of our process, and to know the data is fundamental to understand if your process are aligned with your target and there are no problem of corruption, and they are fully integrated, and we can control the integrity of our process, and this is fundamental.
Thank you very much indeed. I'd like now to pass to Davide Rota. Again, a quick picture of your organization and the areas that you've identified that could be high risk for corruption.
Thank you, John. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Davide Rota. I'm the CEO of a group named Tessellis, which is a technology group basically with three major assets. We own a certain number of telecom brands, including Tiscali and Linkem, and the infrastructure behind these telecom brands. We have a media content provider with a certain number of brands inside, and we are the company that's been assigned the European Commission Artificial Intelligence project to develop a pan-European project in Europe. We are a technology company. We tend to stay up to speed to technology. Despite being funded by myself and another gentleman 25 years ago, it's still a relatively average young company. We have 1,300 employees. We, as a major business, tend to try to understand where technology is going and try to capture it before it's too late, to be very, very quick on the summary of what we do. Your question is very interesting, John. When I've been invited to this event, the first question I had, what has technology to do with corruption? And I can envision two different set of issues, one external and one internal. We work in a telecom sector. The telecom sector is regulated. We own a very precious frequency. We are one of the 5G company assigned the frequency. The history of our frequency is an example of where corruption might lie. We acquired our frequency in 2008. It was a not particularly relevant, not particularly important frequency, auctioned by the Ministry of Communication that existed at that stage. And they were not the major players bidding for this frequency. It was considered a little bit of a sort of faraway frequency. Then 12 years after, that frequency has been defined the frequency for 5G. So all of a sudden, you bought a piece of land in the middle of nowhere, and they built a stadium around it. Okay. We were a bunch of young people that managed to buy the right asset at the right moment, and all of a sudden, you had all the big guys trying to come. And just to give you an idea, the same frequency that we own has been paid 1.8 billion at the last auction. At that very moment, I experienced, we were not sleeping at night. We were really hoping that everybody was doing the right job when so much money was floating around. And I was not particularly worried about the public officials. I was a little bit more about my competitors, to be a little bit straight. But you realize that system has to be transparent and very well built when all of a sudden you own a frequency that's been paid 40 million euros and all of a sudden the frequency is worth 1.8 billion. And one explain why you have to renew it. We might have maybe the chance to explain a little bit better what we did. But The second part is internal. I mean, I 150% agree with you, John. I mean, corruption is a cancer. People die because of corruption. People have to perceive that corruption is as serious as street crime. It's very, very important. And that's the element that internally you have to be sure. I mean, our company invested in the last 20 years a fraction of what obviously the Autostrade per l'Italia invest in Italy, but we invested 6.7 billion in infrastructure using 250 suppliers. It's obvious that if corruption is not part of the culture of a company, it's a potential threat for any form of company. So even if we are a technology company, we have an issue on the outside. Because we are a regulated company, we deal with public officials every day, and we guys that are bigger than us, and we have something to monitor on the inside.
Thank you very much. Davide, you mentioned that you have a sizable number of employees within the company. I think that's a good moment for me to actually move on to Gaetano Morganti, who has been writing this report about how you educate your staff to take corruption into account and not be corrupt. Can you just very briefly tell us what surprised you in gathering the information necessary for this report and the main conclusions that you reached?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the invitation to OECD, to LUMSA. It's really an honor for me to be here today. So, as a university professor, I can only speak about training and education that are, for me, crucial in order to address the corruption risks. I mean, waiting for the commission of the crime to act against corruption is completely useless and maybe even harmful, because corruption cannot be fought only using criminal law against the single author of the crime. The involvement of a corporation in corruption cases is always a significant damage for the corporation in terms of reputation, in terms of related costs, in terms of business continuity, in terms of governance. And this is why the most efficient tool against corruption is prevention. And from a point of view, one of the possible measures to reach this goal is to decide to invest in training. And let me say, to reshape the anti-corruption training from a more traditional one-way knowledge transfer to a collective experience of sharing the values that are behind the anti-corruption. I mean, integrity, responsible business conduct, sustainability, transparency, accountability, ethics, and legality. Even moving from the anti-format, the fight against the anti-corruption, to a more positive setting of values sharing. And let me say, I have a very important to success story to tell to you in terms of capacity of a corporation to invest in this kind of training. I'm referring to my experience in ASPI, in Autostrade per l'Italia, in organizing different training program. I mean, the most important aspect of this success story, in my opinion, is the very strong tone from the top. And this is really an opportunity to thank again Dr. Roberto Tomasi and Nicola Locca and all the ASPI team. Because the challenge was to design a different kind of training program, starting from a first session completely dedicated to ethics and to values, and providing more specific and vertical, let me say, contents only after the first engagement of the class, of the audience, in the value of integrity and legality. And this strong tone from the top and this collective experience that was also in line with the point 6 of the Zero Corruption Manifesto was organized addressing, first of all, the recruitment of the participants. The course was considered by Autostrade per l'Italia as mandatory for their employees, and engaged a very large audience. Let me give you only two numbers. We engaged almost 600 people in more than 2 years, and we delivered 500 hours training, and it was really a challenge to engage, let me know, not legal experts, but engineers, computer scientists, technicians, managers in values, rules, principles. So it was really a challenging experience, but a success story.
Not easy, no. In fact, now that you've been talking about the project that you've been doing with ASPI, what I'd like to do, in fact, is to bring in Roberto Tomasi at this point and to ask him, I mean, apart from that program, how, in more general terms, perhaps, have you tried to spread a consciousness of the need to combat corruption in the company? And then I'm going to put the same question to Davide here.
I don't think that we have to speak only about corruption. When we manage a company, the first issue is to discuss about values. The values is fundamental to define everything. And so we have to have a common understanding about the values in which we believe and about the reason why we operate. We manage a public concession, and we manage a concession to give us services to the country. This is the key point, and the values that we apply to manage this this business is the key point, and we have to start. The second one is to define target. We have to be very, very clear to define which are the target that we want to achieve. We have, I have personally 3 0 points that we have to respect. The 0 road accident, the 0 safety injuries for the site activities, and the 0 corruption. These are values, but are clear target that we have to spread to all the company in all the different level of the company. I try to come to your answer. There is a second point that is the level of the competence inside the company in order to provide this level of services. This is another key point. Values, clear target that we have to provide, and the reason why we run our business, and which are the competence that we need to support these services. Without competence, there is no possibility to support services, believe me. There is no way, and this is the reason why we implement really a wide plan of training. I can say also advanced training, and what Gaetana said is real, because we focus in a specific aspect of our training for our manager, spreading the culture through the different part of the country. This is another important aspect, because the anti-corruption is not the activities of one specific office. Anti-corruption has to be spread through the entire organization. I agree completely. The anti-corruption is also important because it is completely linked with the business continuity. If we are not able to achieve the anti-corruption or the 0 level of anti-corruption, we are not sure that we are not able to achieve the business continuity of the company, and the history of our company, I think, is quite clear, and we know very well this specific point. So I completely agree, and we will in the future we will support to spread also to all the managers at all the company of the country, because our company is quite complex, and so we have to spread not only to Autostrade per l'Italia but also the subsidiaries of Autostrade per l'Italia.
Many thanks, Roberto. Davide.
Well, John, the question, how you ensure that in your company the values are explained and managed, and within those values also the corruption is managed. I've been lucky in my personal experience, because I think to answer that question you have to be trained when you are young. My first 2 jobs in my life, I had the pleasure and the honor to serve in the Guardia di Finanza, unfortunately for a short period. I would like to stay a little bit longer, but I couldn't do it. And the second job, that was my first job. And I think it was a sort of imprinting that I kept for the rest of my life. The second one, I worked for a company named Procter & Gamble, where integrity was well more important than market share. And if you want my opinion on how you wanna, because I obviously completely agree that corruption is part of the bigger picture of values. I think there are 3 elements, without trying to be a little bit self-judgment. No? There are 3 elements. The first one is show the commitment. You have to show the commitment in your company, and I think the commitment has 3 sub-elements, if I can say. You have to show a commitment for the long term. If people understand that your organization works for the long term, they are naturally inclined, second point, not to take shortcuts. People that take shortcuts are because in some way incentivized to work in the short term. I have an example that we were discussing the other day, John, that when my first business trip, in my second job, because the first was the other one, I went to France. I was a kid. I was the youngest kid of the team, because my company was opening a plant in Amiens, a liquid dishwashing company. And we met the mayor that was giving to us for free the ground to build the plant, and they asked for, they were really, really aggressive about asking the commitment to have in the contract that we could not leave before 10 years. And my boss canceled the 10 years and wrote 50. I got the feeling that I was working for a company that didn't care about the short term. So attention, you have to explain people that you have to stay here forever. It's not, you cannot run faster than your mistakes, okay? Don't take the shortcuts, and there's another element on top of values, because I 100% agree on values, but you have to explain people that values come before interest. All the organization that takes 3 hours to decide on something is because their values are not clear. If your values are clear, it's so easy to take a decision. So commitment, I think, is the major form to drive an organization. There are other two, which is less important, but always at the same time important. Assessment, you have to understand where the potential issues are. If you buy stuff from companies that are based in countries where notoriously corruption might be an issue, keep an extra eye. And then assessment. Once at the end of all of this, take a look at the numbers. Miracles do not happen in companies. Somebody triples the business in an hour. There's something that you have to investigate. These two second elements are, in any case, less important than the first one, which is plain people that commitment is driving the company.
You touched on a point that was also brought in by Paola Severino in her opening remarks, which was the balance between, on the one hand, compliance, and on the other hand, profitability. And I'd like to go back to Roberto Tomasi at this point, very briefly, because we are beginning to run out of time. How do you achieve that? How do you prevent compliance from eroding performance?
This is a key point. I don't see that there is conflict between compliance and performances. I'm very, very confident on that. It is something we have in mind, but it is not true. If we are able, and the fact of the shortcut, it is clear, for a company it's more important to understand how we achieve the result than the result. Because if we set clearly the way to achieve the result, we are sure that we will achieve all the results. We have to be confident that the process is light, that the process is fully transparent, and there is no bureaucracy. But again, if we have digitalized all the process, we are able to check day by day if the process is run correctly or not. And so we have to avoid completely this misalignment between control and performances, values, and business. Because believe me, there is no any trade-off between. It is sure that if we apply correctly the rules, the compliance at the company, we will achieve in the correct time and without any problem of business continuity the target.
Davide.
Yeah, I agree with Roberto. I mean, compliance is the first KPI of performance. There's no trade-off between compliance and performance. You have, obviously, we are a for-profit company. We are not a non-profit company, but if you set the KPIs of the company in a way the compliance comes first, then the profit will come after.
What I'd like to do in a last round is to ask each of you in turn if there's a particular thing that you would like to see the national government do, or an international body do, or perhaps a trade association. Perhaps I could start with you, Gaetana. What do you think at the moment is missing?
I think that it would be very important to invest more in prevention and in the culture of integrity, and less in criminal law, criminal justice, and increasing penalties. And let me say, I am a little bit sad in saying so, because I am a criminal law professor, but properly as a criminal law professor, I think that a only repressive answer is not enough and can be harmful. So from the point of view of the government, I think that it would be very important to stress that the answer to the problem of the lack of integrity and corruption is not to punish more, but to spread more the culture of integrity.
Thank you very much. Roberto.
Yeah, I think that the industry is a key role on that. And so probably we cannot think that the problem is only outside and so is due to the government rules and so on, but the industry has a key role to try to implement some process and to show that it's possible to run the company without corruption. The second one is to understand the reason why there is the corruption, because this is an important key factor. Sometimes we maintain in our mind and we have a proper idea, but we don't understand the reason why. This is the reason why I make the example before of the fairness of the contract relation, because if the contract is not fair, there is no way, there is a big risk of increase of corruption. We have to understand this data. I think that every year we have to open an analysis in order to understand the reason why there are some corruption and what we have to change. The impact of the bureaucracy, the impact of the type of how we assign the contract to our supplier, to our contractor. We have to analyze before to try to answer to the reason why and what we have to change. Sometimes we prefer to define the rules without understanding the impact of these rules. I think that for that we have to increase our capability. The industry, we manage a lot of data, and so we can also provide some view about our position. That is a specific way in which we see the system, and so I think that this could be a possible, and these are meetings in which we can exchange our experience in order to increase the level and to check if we are able to decrease the corruption or not. Because if we are not able to reduce the level of the corruption, it means that we are applying system or rules that are not in line with the purpose and with the target that we are foreseeing.
Thank you very much. Davide, you get the last word. Changes that you would like to see.
Well, I agree with the prevention. Like all the most important things are obviously the most complicated because it takes time. I have two other simple elements. One is transparency. If you are a regulator, a politician, a public official, and you have to discuss an important topic, try to meet all the companies together. Don't meet people inside the room without other people. I think it can give a very clear sense of transparency that you have nothing to hide, and you want to meet people in the right way. And the last one is that for whoever is making the law, consider this kind of crime as important as other kind of crimes. I think it's important. If you pass the message that if you corrupt somebody, well, at the end of the day, you stay 3 days of house arrest and then they take you out. I mean, that's not the right message. So in a certain way, the way I see this is that it's more important than other forms of criminality in the world.
Thank you very much indeed. That brings us to the end of panel 1, and for the second panel, I'm going to step aside and leave the moderation to Carmine Di Noia, who might like to come up to the podium and take over. And I can also ask the panelists for his panel, please, to come up to the platform. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. And then, okay, my panelists, so Lorenzo Salazar, a member of the management group of the working group, OECD Working Group on Bribery, Nicola Locca, who is the chair of the business at the OECD Anti-Corruption Committee, Francesca Palisi, head of Legal and Tax Advisory Department, Italian Bankers Association, and Rosario Massino, Commander, Special Unit Command, Guardia di Finanza. Now, again, thanks for this invitation to BIAC and to also to the Italian Foreign and International Cooperation Ministry. Actually, it's an interesting panel, interesting conference. Great to be here also with all these people. Let me start with a short anecdote. So once a journalist, I don't know if it was from The Economist, FT, visited a town which was, a bit renowned for having no corruption. And after investigating, that's great, he asked the mayor, how do you manage to maintain zero corruption? And the mayor replied, between you and me, it wasn't easy at first. But once you figure out the right pricing, everything fell into place. Now, so this is what is the right pricing, and let's say it's how we interpret this right pricing, the bad or in the good way. And so basically the idea, and I think it was already shared in at the beginning, the speeches of Paolo Severino, but also the panel, and collective efforts. We need collective efforts in combating corruption. They are important in today's economic and political context, and many countries understand this. And that's why also at the OECD, this is what our Director for Financial Enterprise Affairs is doing, and so combating in particular foreign bribery, which plays a key role in this area, because also many of the firms operating in many sectors, they're also multinational. So beyond research and analysis, this effort is truly multi-stakeholder, and I would say multidisciplinary. So let me commend BIAC for his active engagement across our committees for championing this cause, and also commend Italy for its active role in implementing and enforcing the Anti-Bribery Convention, and also for promoting a fight against corruption under this year's Italian G7 Presidency. And I would say also Italy is also a model for many countries, and we are also exporting, and many are asking us, especially in the last years. So I will just open the panel with a few words to set the scene on also the OECD ongoing work on anti-corruption, business integrity, and then we'll go to our panel. And now, as most of you know, the OECD Working Group on Bribery is the custodian of the OECD Convention on combating foreign bribery, which is the only internationally, legally binding treaty tackling the supply side of corruption in international business. And this year, it's our birthday, it's our anniversary, 25th anniversary of the entry into force of the convention in 1999. Now, today the convention go much beyond the OECD remit, our 38 countries plus others. We have 46 members, including both OECD and non-OECD countries. Each of these members have, has committed to making foreign bribery a criminal offense and to holding their citizens and companies liable for this crime through effective enforcement and sanctions. Now, the working group's enforcement data is a testament to these efforts. According to the latest enforcement data, around 1,000 individuals and nearly 700 entities have been sanctioned for foreign bribery and related offenses, and over nearly 500 investigations were ongoing. And these cases have resulted in record fines. For example, these includes a $3 billion settlement of Goldman Sachs for its role in a YMDB scandal in October 2020. Even if I have to say, and I was listening carefully to the previous panel, I was a commissioner at CONSOB. I don't think, this is also for the press, that we measure the effectiveness of a regime in terms of the amount of sanctions or the amount of fines. I mean, a perfect regime may work without sanctions. Sanctions are in place. They are an important, deterrent for that. And people really behave correctly because they think that it is correct to do it. And also, because then there is sanctions are there. Now, this is good progress. We can do better. That's why the working group on bribery, with valuable input from BIAC, adopted also our 2021 anti-bribery recommendation, so to complement the convention and strengthen. Under the recommendation, actually, the working group on bribery agreed to put in place new measure to reinforce its effort to prevent, detect, and investigate foreign bribery. And I think in terms of the prevention, also what was said before, in terms of education is essential. And also these include measures that may be of particular interest for today's discussion. For one, the anti-bribery recommendation recognizes government's efforts to offer not only sticks, but also carrots. So in terms of incentives to combat corruption and promote integrity. Actually, in particular, it encourages incentives for companies to develop internal controls, ethics, and compliance programs or measures, and highlights the need to change corporate culture and tone from the top to prioritize compliance. And again, what's very important, what was said before, these are not costs, these are actually investment, and there is no, no trade-off between, compliance and profitability. For another, the recommendation recognizes that companies need clear signals from the government or what good corporate behavior looks like. And that's why the recommendation also includes an updated OECD good practice guidance on internal controls, ethics, and compliance, which is the first and only guidance for its kind adopted at the intergovernmental level, providing guidance to companies operating with integrities, including SMEs. Now, on enforcement by government, taken together, the Convention and the 2021 Anti-Bribery Recommendation represent a very important foundation for stepping up the fight against foreign bribery. This requires actually active commitment from and enforcement by the countries that have signed up these obligations. This includes Italy, and this was mentioned already before, which is a key member of the OECD Working Group on Bribery with a very important delegation, and they're all here today. And for example, Italy's Phase 4 evaluation by the Working Group on Bribery commended the country for its enforcement efforts. It also made recommendations for how Italy can further strengthen its efforts under the Convention. And so we will hear an update in this regard from Italy in October, when the working group considers Italy's 2 years written follow-up report. In addition, during the G7 Presidency, Italy Presidency, we see Italy promote efforts in combating corruption in development assistance. And this is a good example, actually, of the links we can and should be making between anti-corruption and sustainable development. I hope that really we can make further links like this one during also today's discussion to ensure that our fight against corruption is holistic and impactful. Now, in parallel, and this is, and I am about to conclude this introduction, business is really key to this effort. And again, I'm very happy also for the previous panel and all today's conference, given really the role that the private sector plays in economic development. So government need to continuously engage with businesses in combating corruption, and business associations, especially BIAC, are valuable and valued partners in our work. BIAC, for example, is regularly invited, is an institutional stakeholder at the OECD, so invited to update the Working Group on Bribery on its anti-corruption work, including the BIAC Zero Corruption Manifesto. BIAC also works with the Secretariat of the Working Group on Bribery to identify private sector representatives to participate in the on-site visits that make up each of our country evaluations under the Convention. And it's very important that we meet all the right people and from also very diverse opinions. These visits help us better understand how national foreign bribery legislation is understood, implemented, and complied with by companies and citizens in the evaluated country. So we also welcome and encourage engagement between the public and private sectors, including through multi-stakeholder initiatives to better assess and develop effective measures to address these risks. And this includes actually our joint work with the UN Office on Drugs and Crime and the UN Global Compact. We developed this resource guide on state measures for strengthening business integrity to inform and promote government efforts to incentivize anti-corruption, compliance measures and progress. And this resource guide will be launched actually at the OECD Global Anti-Corruption Integrity Forum, the GACEF, next month, where I really hope to see many of you in Paris. Now, so it's clear, and to conclude, that corruption, is a global challenge. As we mark the 25th anniversary of the Convention, so the spotlight is also largely on the business community, so including BIAC, whose role is absolutely vital. So to go back, I would say, to the anecdote, the town had a unique approach to managing corruption, and we have to interpret, but it was based in a sense on collaboration, innovation and resilience. So together, all together, I think we have to confront the challenges ahead and champion a future where integrity and transparency lead the way. So let's go to our panel. So we continue this discussion. The idea is basically to focus on what are the priorities and activities that all the organizations of the panelists are undertaking to fight corruption, but also the areas where the OECD can improve its efforts to this regard. So we will try to have also some time for a Q&A session. So please, if we have time, be prepared to have a question from the floor. And okay, so maybe I start also, I'm a bit biased because we meet often with Lorenzo Salazar. So maybe Lorenzo to provide some insights, focusing also on, given your role on the management group, on what are the priorities of the OECD WGB. WGB is the Working Group on Bribery. Lorenzo.
Thank you very much, Carmine. I'm not only in the management group of the Working Group on Bribery, I'm also Deputy Prosecutor General in Naples, so I am on the repressive side as a prosecutor. So, usual disclaimer, what I'm going to say does not engage the Working Group on Bribery, only myself. And it's not for me to make general statements to teach you why it is important to tackle foreign bribery, but I would say that in these days of crisis, we all notice how important is international trade for our daily life. And we notice when it is put in danger by external factors such as wars or terrorism. Foreign bribery is something which affects international trade and is a permanent factor which endangers the creation of a level playing field. This is why our convention, as Carmine has already recalled, is so important. It is at the center of the international efforts against foreign bribery, and the Working Group on Bribery is at the center of this center, if I may, by monitoring the full and effective implementation of the OECD instruments, the convention and the recommendation of 2009 as modified in 2021. The monitoring and evaluation process that we perform are considered as the gold standard by the anti-corruption community. And you already remember our results. We have an increasing number of foreign bribery investigations from our state parties, increased of 59%, basically, more or less in the last 6 years. So this is the good news. Our priorities, monitoring, enforcing, engaging, and there is a fourth factor which I will not mention for the moment. I will leave this for the end. Monitoring, first of all. Monitoring is our core business for the Working Group on Bribery. We monitoring the effective implementation of the convention, of the recommendation by our members. We are completing the phase 4. It's already the fourth cycle of evaluation that we perform with our state parties, and we already look forward to the phase 5 that we hope to start in the years to come. But monitoring is not a scope in itself. We don't do monitoring just as an exercise. It must bring to a more effective enforcement of the convention and of the recommendation. So by monitoring, we put the pressure on our member states in order to make progresses in the implementation of the convention. At the end of each monitoring cycle, at the end of each report by our working group, we address recommendation to the state, and then we monitoring for the full and effective implementation of these recommendations. Carmine already recalled us in October this year, Italy will have to report on the implementation of the number of recommendations addressed to us after the phase 4 report. Enforcement. Unfortunately, I have to say that there is still a lot to do, since roughly 1/3 of our state parties have not yet concluded a foreign bribery case. 1/3 of our member states. And many members, I have to say, including the country I know the best, have yet to implement many of the recommendations which have been addressed to them for critically anti-bribery reforms. So recommendations are there. If we do not implement them, this is a challenge. And I have to remember that our stakeholders are not it's not the private sector. Our stakeholders are the governments, first of all, because they have to implement by legislative and administrative reforms our recommendations. So our governments and eventually our judicial authorities are those who we are addressing, not the private sector. So I think that for the future we will put more attention, not only to we have to put more attention on the demand side. This is something which is increasing not only in particular at UN level, I would say also in other international fora. There is a demand from our, let's say, state parties to put more attention on the demand side. If we have the demand, then we have bribes. This is for clear. It's also true that our convention only addresses the offer, the active corruption, but demand side will be, I believe, in the future on our table in one way or another. And finally, we have to engage with other countries. If you take a map of the world, you will see, including the states parties to the convention, you will see a big hole in the middle, in particular in East Asia, China, India, Indonesia, Thailand, etc. All these countries which are players and among the most important players in international trade are not in the parties to the convention. So we are trying to address this country to promote an approach by these countries to the convention. And now I come to the final hidden component of the recipe, funding. It's clear that to fulfill all our activities, and I have not mentioned plenty of them, we also produce plenty of publications and interesting documentation coming from our activities, we need money. And again, we come back to the governments, to the ambassador in the OECD, we need some money to fulfill our task. Okay, so I respect the 6 minutes. And,
Thank you, Lorenzo. Now you can go around. You can go around the audience asking for some money. I can give you this. No, so I think it's a very important issue also what you tackle. I mean, we need to tackle all sides, you know demand, supply, and the institutional framework. And everything is very effective. And obviously, we have an increasing number of countries to have effective recommendation. I have to say also on our side, we're trying to be more effective. Maybe we can also streamline the work. At the same, we need also to be credible, and so it's important also to review countries maybe also more often. We have an increasing number, and as you were saying, important issue is that, I mean, there are no borders. It's like, environmental issues. There are no borders somewhere on corruption, and especially on foreign corruption. So this is important that becomes, and we are attracting actually countries even beyond what is again the institutional remit of the OECD as full membership, so bottom up and not top down. So, Nicola, Zero Corruption Campaign, where we are, and again, the contribution of businesses is really essential.
Thank you, Carmine. First of all, I would like to thank Business at OECD for making this happen, and to emphasize how honored I am to serve as a chair of the Business at OECD Anti-Corruption Committee representing Italy and Autostrade per l'Italia. I would like to thank Hani Rosenbaum and also congratulate with all the team that worked on the manifesto. I would like to thank the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the patronage, especially to Davide Bergami, who couldn't make it, and Giovanni Tartaglia Polcini for their support. I would like also to thank Confindustria and my CEO and Autostrade per l'Italia top management is present today for setting the tone and showing their dedication in spreading the culture of integrity and sustainability all around Autostrade Group. And Carmine, I will start my contribution with two numbers, 2024 and 0. 2024, this year, is a critical year for the fight against corruption as the OECD Anti-Bribery Convention turns 25, as you said, and also Hani underlined. And this is a great opportunity for us to switch our vision in the fight against corruption. And here, this brings us to the second number, that is 0. 0 is a value, 0 has a value, 0 is a target, as zero corruption, as also Roberto Tormasi underlined. Corruption is a global cross-cutting issue we must face together to assure a sustainable future and progress on long-term challenges. If we allow corruption to deprive the next generations of key resources such as education, healthcare, security and safety standards, environmental rights, social welfare, we will inflict an intolerable burden of inequality on our children. For this reason, we must have the courage to admit that it is possible to eliminate corruption. I repeat, it is possible to eliminate corruption. And we must have the intellectual honesty to give this target a proper dignity within the UN SDG agenda. In order to translate this commitment into action, Business at OECD has issued the Zero Corruption Manifesto that calls for the treatment of zero corruption as the 18th SDG and puts forward the 10 golden rules in the fight against corruption and to reach this target. So it is a multi-stakeholder, or as Giovanni Tartaglia said, a multi-shareholder paper that can be adopted by public and private organizations, business representatives. In Italy, was adopted officially by Transparency International Italia. In Autostrade per l'Italia, we have the manifesto embedded in our anti-corruption policies. Also, other multinational enterprises adopted officially the manifesto, and international associations like the IFAC. If you go on the next slide, please, I will go in each of the 10 golden rules that tell us how to translate the commitment into action very, very quickly. So the first 3 tell us how to change the way to think about corruption. The first rule, we called it racing to zero. This means that we have to force our brain to travel in a different pathway. This means that we have to break our bias that corruption cannot be eliminated. Rule number 2, human rights anti-corruption. We have to recognize that corruption is a crime that undermines human rights. Personally, I believe that human rights assurance programs and anti-corruption programs share the same roots. So we should enable an integrated approach. Number 3, corruption is a cross-cutting issue. This means that the benefits from zero corruption can help the achievement of the other SDGs. From rule number 4 to number 7, we want to create meaningful tools to fight corruption. Number 4, stimulate responsible conduct. This means that we have to work on education, as Professor Severino said, as Professor Morgante said. Education helps us to build future-ready, equipped generation. But let me focus on the supply side of bribery, on the stimulating a responsible business conduct. What does it mean? It means that the profit generated outside ethical boundaries cannot be considered as a profit anymore. Means, as the CEO said, that there is no trade-off between performance and compliance, results and rules, business and values. This means that corporations should evaluate their actions not only from an economic and financial point of view, but also considering the social and the environmental impact of these actions. So if I jump on the rule number 5, whistleblowing is a key instrument in the fight against corruption. So we all must commit in creating a psychologically safe environment to allow the good guys to go in different directions in order to enable a speak-up culture. Number 6, This is one of the most important rules. Freedom of press. I talked before about human rights. Freedom of press is a human right. I'm really happy that today here we have a representative of the press because vigilant media is crucial for the fight against corruption, and free press can protect our society by uncovering the truth. Number 7, artificial intelligence is a game changer in the fight against corruption. So as corporations, we should use artificial intelligence in order to implement continuous monitoring system and to increase our compliance capacity with a building block approach, because we have to take into considerations the constraints of small and medium enterprises. Number 8, it's glocal. Glocal means, as a new word to say, think global, act local. So it means that when we design anti-corruption programs, we have to be inspired by global principles, and these OECD help us to set the standards. But when we implement the anti-corruption programs, we have to take into consideration the peculiarities of the local context. Number 9, zero tolerance, it's so clear. Number 10, collective action, a multi-shareholder approach. It is crucial to build alliances between government, civil society, and private sector in order to level the playing field, as Lorenzo said before. I go in the conclusion, just to wrap up, if we go in the next slide. To race to zero corruption is a great responsibility. We must give zero corruption a proper dignity within the UN SDG agenda. It is possible to eliminate corruption, but it takes courage. And this is a practical and necessary step towards a resilient and sustainable real economy. And I leave you with the essential truth about zero corruption with the 6 words. It's on, it's us, it's a must. It's on because zero corruption is already happening. We pushed the bottom from off to on. It's us, only together can we make it happen. And it's a must because we do not have plan B. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicola. Because it's important also to have, for your passion, also when you say, you see, there is a price for having zero corruption, but I think it's a price that is worth really to pay, and maybe it's not so expensive as we think, and reward is proportional to the effort. Francesca, so your experience, so maybe hear about also Bankers Association, practices, best practices, priorities for the fight, maybe on one side, I guess, money laundering, but also the scope for private and public collaboration.
Yes, thank you very much, Nuccio, and thank you, BIAC, to invited me and Abby to be part of this important forum. As Nicola already said, the fight against corruption calls on institutions, organizations, and citizens in fostering business integrity. And undoubtedly, the economic crime prevention can only be a team game among all these actors. In this perspective, and as regards the business community, I think that the banks are with no doubt part of the solution. First of all, I would like to speak about some relevant aspects in the fight against economic crimes where banks are particularly committed. And money laundering is probably the main field of interest in this sense. Banks gave a significant contribution in combating and preventing money laundering. And it's simply to remember that more or less the 80% of suspicious transaction reports are sent by banks and other financial intermediaries each year. And all the AML legislation is inspired to the so-called risk-based approach, which is the key tool of the entire anti-money laundering framework and involves all the actors in preventing and combating this crime, so is addressed both to regulators and obliged entities, and means a flexible system, a tailor-made system that allows obliged parties, and banks in particular, to regulate the frequency and the intensity of their controls on the basis of the risk of the situation concretely addressed. The point of attention of this risk-based approach, also in a perspective of anti-bribery and corruption fight, is on how to shift the tools that could allow banks and other obliged entities to improve and make more efficient anti-money laundering risk assessment, and to determine with increased precision the risks to which they are exposed. In this sense, new technologies such as artificial intelligence, but also machine learning, can play a very, very important role on this. The use of such technologies in the identification, assessment, and management of AML risk could allow for a more dynamic risk analysis, making use of more structured and interconnected set of data. So in this context, it is essential to promote, to go towards a clear regulatory framework that balances all the needs at stake and that can encourage the adoption of systems with robust data and capacity of processing a lot of information that could be missed in a traditional risk analysis. In this sense, I would like also to remember that our Financial Intelligence Unit, the UIF, has all been at the forefront of this topic and is on the way to exploiting to give other instructions and indication about the use of technologies in this field. Another point of attention for banks in this field is the cooperation between public sector in exchange of data. So it's important to further develop the possibility of sharing relevant information, both between private actors and between private actors and the authorities responsible of combating ML phenomena. The more information is available to intermediaries, the more the identification of the money laundering risk to which they are exposed will be easier. And it's possible in this way to allow the intermediaries, but also I think the authorities, to focus on the sectors, activities, or operation that are actually most at risk. To this end, it's necessary, therefore, to break down, to start to breaking down the barriers, mainly regulatory, to the circulation of such information. And at European level, the very new AML package will put some step towards this goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca, also reminding us the recent package on money laundering, which had many aspects, but also I think, okay, the role of regulation, of coordination in the public sector. Sometimes, you know, also in some cases, maybe regulations and effective supervision, so the effective behavior of authorities, this is coming from the EU, or international EU, but also at the local level can be an issue and actually can be I would say, an indirect support for corruption, because when, you know, situations are not true, are not clear, completely crystal clear, then, okay, on both sides there can be some let's say, not completely, you know, there are opaque situations, okay, where obviously corruption can, and so also I would say that a more healthy exchange between the public and private sector is would add more competence in the private sector, and also more competence in the public sector. I remember that, okay, again, I'm biased by my experience. I work in an association, as Francesca knows, Confindustria is here, was in Estonia for 15 years, but there is the story of the first SEC in the States, the first CONSOB, and created by Roosevelt in 1935. And you know what? After the Great Depression, okay, long story, cut it short, the first chair Roosevelt chose as first chair of the SEC, now SEC is a very powerful institution, actually Joseph Kennedy, the father of Joe Kennedy. And maybe you know the story I always use for my students. He was very much criticized, Roosevelt. Why? Because Joseph Kennedy, then he became ambassador, was a very famous market manipulator. Very bad guy, okay, also having on drug, alcohol, but market manipulator. And Roosevelt said basically, okay, I need someone who really understands, you know, the thing to fight really a more effective way. Generale Massino, so it would be interesting to also obviously for us to hear your views regarding Guardia di Finanza, so the strategies in combating financial crimes and corruption. Generale.
Thank you, Mr. Di Noio, thank you. And may I thank you, the organization, for inviting us to saying some words about Guardia di Finanza in this context, and I'm grateful to the previous panelists for their outstanding contributions. And so, the topic I am to deal with is current strategies in combating financial crimes and corruption at Guardia di Finanza. But the first question I feel I should answer is Guardia di Finanza, why? Well, I go back to the basics, and I start from the law, because in the law we can find the truth without so many words, and possibly better than I can do. And the law says that the Guardia di Finanza is a police with a military structure, having general competence in economic and financial matters. And the Guardia di Finanza is intended to refer to the Minister of Economy and Finance of Italy. Well, some keywords. Police, that is law enforcement. This is the field we are playing on. Military structure, so a very strong structure indeed, and which we are used to being efficient, fast, and we have not so many problems on starting early in the morning or closing late in the night. And I can see the colleagues laughing in the audience. But there is no problem for us. We just can do what must be done, simply. General competence in economic and financial matters. I go back to this in a few seconds. But important remark. We refer directly to the Minister of Economy and Finance. So we directly depend on the Italian government, that is the expression of the decisions made by Italian people with the polls. And we refer directly to the minister. Obviously, within the framework, within the scope of the Italian law. What is economic and financial matters from our point of view? Well, the list is quite long, and I summarize. Taxes, customs duties, revenues and expenditures, currencies, securities, means of payment, financial and security markets, copyrights, know-how, patents, and eventually any other national economic and financial interest or of the European Union. This is intended to protect, according to the law, the public budget of the Italian Republic, of the regions, of the local Italian authorities and of the European Union. So we can say that we are also an international police according to the Italian law, and we will see how this works. So this is, in few words, the Guardia di Finanza. This has operational consequences on different levels. The judicial police, the administrative police, and analysis activities that are mainly linked to the administrative police activities. Judicial police, we report to the public prosecutors all over the country. We have hundreds and hundreds of operational units dealing with any kind of economic and financial offense, reporting to the public prosecutors and carrying out the investigations that are decided by the public prosecutors, and in close consistence with the orders of the judicial authorities. It looks difficult, but it is very easy if you are compliant with the rules and with the law. And obviously, we have an experience that comes from the judicial investigations, and an experience especially related to the role of economic and financial crime, and mainly of the organized crime. And we are fully aware that economic and financial criminal organizations and that organized crime organization are always searching for any way for making money, and I say obviously illicit money, and that investigation must be aimed at finding the way they work. And we always remember the lesson, the heritage of Giovanni Falcone, and we follow the money, because following the money is the key for understanding what happens in the real world, what happens in the black world, what happens in black markets and in black economy. Obviously, economic and financial crimes and organized crime always try to enter in any procedure of public procurement and of public contracts, and they often try to enter in the procedures since their early on, since the moment the procedures start. They try to infiltrate at any level the public administration, and so we have to keep a very high level of surveillance on what happens at any level. On the other hand, we also work for prevention activities in the framework of administrative police. It's a kind of having a brain divided into two partitions, the same way you can divide an hard disk, for example. But the two partitions being always closely connected each to the other, because anytime you have a criminal offense, you have to forget that you are administrative police, and you have to turn your mind into judicial police and submitting everything to the public prosecutor in order to make sure that the procedure is the one you really need for repressing the crime, for identifying the people who are responsible for crimes, and to reporting soon and completely to the judicial authorities. Then, a mind divided into two partitions, working together, but being always separated and having clear what you are doing in any moment you move. Administrative activity. So, first of all, our own administrative activity. Our own administrative activity is mainly in the responsibility of a special unit we created in 2015. That is the special unit, the special anti-corruption unit that is commanded by Brigadier General Enrico Mion, down there in the audience. And this unit is divided into 3 teams. The anti-corruption and transparency team, the surveillance on public contracts team, and the public administration team. These teams carry out analysis at different levels for identifying, for targeting businesses and individuals that can be investigated on administrative level for any possible infringement to the rules of, on transparency and anti-corruption. The analysis can be a strategic analysis, that is an operational context analysis, operational risk analysis, operational intelligence analysis as well. Some words I must say about the cooperation with the ANAC, the National Authority on Anti-Corruption. We have a memorandum of understanding and we carry out joint inspections and activities. Also, we have a network for international cooperation, having deployed a number of senior officers to different Italian embassies abroad, the European Union, OECD, and also significant international partners. And also we rely on training. We host the OECD International Academy for Tax Crime Investigation at our Economic and Financial Police School in Lido di Ostia. And some courses are to be released within the 2024 on corruption. And also we have the referent of CIPOL, the European Academy of Police for Italy. And we also have a bilateral cooperation, a course for Ukrainian magistrate expressly dedicated on corruption and bribery has already been done in the first weeks of the year. I apologize for having said too many words, but this is just love for the finance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Generale. Actually, we have your colleague, General Raffaele D'Angelo, who is also working with us at the representation and a lot of support. So we actually, I think we are on time, so more or less. I did not enforce too much, but I was not corrupted. There was no bribe on me, but I thought it was really very interesting to listen to all of you. I think this is a path that is a passetto, we could say, because for, you know, the part was called passetto, but this is a passage to go to the other side, the Pope were using. And is a path, you know, to really to zero corruption. And then I think we can achieve it all together. I think business, public institutions, we need enforcement, we need credible rules. We need also international standards because there are no borders. So OECD is also there, also thanks to the work all of you. And so thanks again to BIAC and Foreign Ministry Affairs. And we go so to the next, I think, John, is your case.
Again, Carmine, can I break the etiquette? The audience and the room is so crowded. Can we take a selfie with the all together? Is it possible? Come here with all
this
the
is a bribe here. There is some corruption. Okay.
Please.
But if it's a selfie, you need to be one of the Fantastic Four. Maybe we can ask someone.
Allora, dai Nicola. Poi però ce la devi girare.
Was not even arrested here. His CEO is not here, otherwise he would have.
Okay. È il ragazzo.
Allora, thank you, Carmine, and thank you for bringing us out pretty much on time. Though I am told that it is of paramount importance that I conclude this morning's proceedings in time for you to experience the gastronomic excellence offered by LUMSA and to network at the lunch. So I am going to first of all ask the policy manager of BIAC, Benedikt Wiedenhofer, to make a brief introduction to this section, which zeroes in on an aspect that we've heard about several times already this morning, which is the importance of education and of training in tackling the plague of corruption. After that, I'm going to pass over to Professor Di Carlo for a brief presentation about his work at the University of Tor Vergata here in Rome, which has a master's course that he teaches specifically dedicated to anti-corruption, before then passing on to the corporate and other representatives on our panel for a free-flowing discussion of this subject. So, first of all, Benedikt.
Thank you, John, and welcome everyone to our Business at OECD Zero Corruption Forum. On the previous panel, Nicola Aloca, the chair of our Anti-Corruption Committee, mentioned the Zero Corruption Manifesto, which has guided the work of Business at OECD on anti-corruption since its release. Principle 4 of the manifesto, which is entitled Stimulating Responsible Conduct, highlights the need to develop a culture of integrity, transparency, ethics within any context, any entity, any government, and any jurisdiction. Education and training are crucial tools to turn this commitment into concrete outcomes and in order and to prepare the ground for eliminating corruption. They can raise awareness on the negative impact of corruption, they can spread best practices for countering it, and they can achieve societal change through fostering new behavioral norms and values amongst future generations. This is why Business at OECD released the paper entitled Shaping the Values for a Sustainable Future, Education for the Fight Against Corruption, last year in November. You can download it through the QR code that you received at the entrance. There are still documents left at the entrance, so I invite you to get them if you don't have one yet. You also have access to the event agenda, our anti-corruption campaign website, and other documents that explain more about our work. So please feel free to grab one. The paper that I just mentioned looks at how schools and universities include anti-corruption in their curricula, and it showcases how public administrations, business and professional organizations, and companies foster integrity through trainings for their staff or supply chains. The paper identifies success factors and challenges for successful anti-corruption trainings, and it tables a number of policy recommendations for the OECD and its member countries. Recommendations include integrating ethics as a standard component in education systems, collecting and exchanging best practices, creating guidance and making training material publicly available, and providing incentives such as tax breaks or awards for business integrity trainings. Most importantly, the paper includes 18 use cases that showcase how companies, universities, and business associations leverage education and training concretely in their daily efforts to promote integrity. All the speakers on this panel represent organizations that contributed a use case to our paper, so it is now my great pleasure to hand the floor back to John in order that our distinguished speakers can share their insights with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Benedikt. I'm going to now bring in Professor Di Carlo to talk about a course that he runs at the University Tor Vergata specifically on this subject. And over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this very inspiring forum. In 10 minutes, it's not so easy to explain all the things that we do in our master. So I think that best thing I can do is to give you the mission that we have. Because I think that our mission allow us also to summarize some of the important aspects emerged in the other panels. So this is the mission. We train our students to become responsible leaders for guiding through a specific mission and the support of artificial intelligence, the governance and management of firms and public administration towards the common good. So what are the main aspects of this mission? There are 4 aspects that I want to underline. The first is the leadership. At the beginning of the forum, Professor Severino said, it's important to, but we said other, we listened, other panelists said the same things, more or less. Set the tone of the top, values, inspire people, spread a culture of integrity. So how can we do that? We do believe that we have to start with the leadership. And the leadership is a process through which a leader can orient people towards some objectives represented in the mission. So the second point is the mission statement. This is the starting point for every organization, not just private, but also public administrations. We have a mission in our master. Why? Mainly for 2 reasons. First of all, because through the mission, we can select the topics that for us are important. And second, because we have to select trainers. And we want trainers that are not able just to give to our students the tools that we all know that are important to transfer the culture of integrity. We want trainers that have virtues. And for what concerns our potential students, for us, the mission is the best way to explain why we exist. And we do not exist only to fight against corruption. Corruption is absolutely a negative term, but we do believe that in order to fight corruption, it's better to enlarge the term, saying what? That corruption is a deviation from the common good. So this is the other term that for us is important, common good. And of course, when we say common good, one of the first things to do is to specify what the common good is for us. The other element is artificial intelligence, is a new term that we have in our mission. We do believe that artificial intelligence could represent a strong support to fight against corruption. We use, for instance, starting from this year, artificial intelligence to try to solve some very difficult ethical dilemmas or very difficult situations of conflict of interest. So these are the terms that for us are important. And what is the connection between leadership and mission? If you really want a good leader that orient people, the leader needs a mission, as well as the mission need a leader, because otherwise it's impossible to orient the organization, especially when the organization is too complex. But the other aspect that is central is how to concretely put the culture of integrity. Mission is the starting point as well as the leadership. I had some students that in the past said to me, but professor, all very beautiful words. You talk about common good, we all agree with you. But now, how can we move into action? Do you have the specific tools to do that? And this is what we imagine. This is what we call the system for the common good. The system for the common good is represented by 2 important pillars. We have tools and we have persons. So one could say, okay, but we all have the tools that you represented there. For instance, we have a mission statement, We have, for instance, a code of ethics. We have guidelines for conflict of interest, guidelines to fight corruptions, and we have strategic planning, incentives, and so on. Yeah, for sure. We all have all these things. But are all these things coherent or not? Because sometimes we have a good mission, but what about, for instance, the incentives that we give in order to achieve the mission? Sometimes the mission say very beautiful things. We have to achieve not only economic objective, but also sustainable objective. What about the incentives that we have? Because if we have only incentives, as one said before, on the short-term period, and that are based only on the economic aspect, what about the sustainability? I do believe that compliance is important. Now I'm saying this about firms, so about so-called profit organizations. Compliance is at the same level of the profitability of the firm. There is not one that is more important than the others, but how can we transmit these values? We do believe that in order to do that, we have to rethink the way we imagine the corporations, or more in general, firms. We normally consider firms as an instrument of shareholders. If we continue to imagine firms as an instrument of shareholders, it's extremely important, it's difficult for the governance to think also to other aspects. In our master, we use a different model. We said that the firm is an institution that is separated from all stakeholders, also shareholders. So, well, it's not a problem if shareholders continue to think to profit. This is capitalism. So they can continue, and it's important, I think, to continue to profit, because it means, it is not a dirty word, it means that the firm is able to have a value that is produced, so revenues that are higher than costs. It means that we have an efficient circuit of production, but it's not enough. The interest of the firm is not only to have profit, but also respect the rules. So compliance is at the same level for the firm is the same, even if for people that operate in the company, these two aspects are in trade-off. If I'm a compliance officer, for me the most important thing is the compliance. If I'm in another part of the firm and my incentive is connected to the revenues, probably for me revenues are more important than compliance. So we have different persons in the firms with different incentives and different mental model, but then we have the firm, and the firm could be considered as a separate institution. And there is another aspect that I want to underline. We normally refuse to talk about shareholders, because the previous theory we use, especially in our courses, was shareholder theory. According to the shareholder theory, the firm exists to maximize value for shareholders. And now we move to the stakeholder theory. So the firm should create value for everyone, but we believe that is not sufficient. It's not sufficient for, why? Because if we think to the stakeholders, and we say we have to create value for stakeholders, we have the idea that in front of us, we have persons that have rights. They have the rights to be satisfied for what concerns their interests. It's not sufficient. We want, this is the term that we use, responsible holders. What is the difference between stakeholders and responsible holders? That responsible holders not only have rights, they have duties. This is what I say also to my students. You are not only stakeholders, you are responsible holders. It means what? For instance, and I conclude with this example, that when you have to do, so you have the right, of course, to do the exam. Yeah, this is your rights, but you have also a responsibility. You have to do the exam, because you are a responsible holder. You have to do the exam when you are well prepared. Because if you are not well prepared, what happened? I waste time, you waste time, and we waste resources. Because, for instance, I have to print papers to do the written exam, and so on. So we do believe that we can really achieve the results that Nicola said before. We can have zero corruption. We do believe that in order to achieve this result, it is important to go all together towards the common good, without difference between private, public sectors. They are the same. So 3 levels: institutions, firms, and people, if we want to do that. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed. Common good in this particular context is to bring out the conference on time for everybody to have their lunch. So I'm going to move on now to our corporate guests to talk about how they go about educating staff in their individual companies about the need to combat corruption and the need to resist the temptations thereof. So on the, what you might call the supply side of the affair, we have our 3 corporate guests, and I'm going to start, if I may, with Rauno Hoffmann, who can tell us about how he goes about educating his staff within Novartis.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Let me start by saying it's a great pleasure to be part of this event and part of this distinguished panel. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. Maybe quickly about Novartis. Novartis is a Swiss-based multinational pharmaceutical company. We operate in more than 100 countries, and as part of our industry, we need to interact and we need to inform different stakeholders. So we work closely with healthcare professionals, healthcare organizations like hospitals, patients, patient organizations, distributors, wholesalers, but also public officials. And in this respect, the many interactions that we have, we need to make sure that those interactions are conducted in a responsible and ethical and compliant way. And I would like to echo what Ms. Seravino said at the beginning, because this is absolutely right. Change starts with education. So if we want to change the ecosystem, if we want to change the current environment, then we need to raise awareness about the problem of corruption. And we need to raise awareness about this, not only within organizations, even if I have to say our associates are also part of the societies, but also, at universities, as already mentioned. We all know about the detrimental effect of corruption. But if we do not find a holistic approach to address this problem, then we cannot assume that we are successful. So what we need, in my view, is a holistic model, a comprehensive model, and education is a critical element because it has been proven to be successful, because it has a preventative effect, and it was mentioned before, prevention is still, in my view, undervalued. There is a strong focus on prosecution, but prevention should be the focus. So if we are successful here, then we will be able to instill through education ethical values, we will increase transparency, and we will promote the culture of integrity. So we are a multinational organization, and let me also be very transparent. We will never be perfect. But what we are committed to do the right thing. We are committed to run our business in a responsible and compliant way. And therefore, education and training plays a critical role. And let me now quickly explain how we have designed our overall training program in the different areas. So we have basically 3 pillars. And the first pillar, which is not unusual because many of the companies have this, we have a global e-training. It's a platform, and we do a yearly curriculum assessment. We collect information from our enterprise risk management, so it's the commercial side, which is about strategic risk, our different functional risk assessment, the results from our colleagues from internal audit, compliance reviews, but also from our Speak Up channel, which is some would call a whistleblowing hotline. Here we identify the most relevant and high-risk areas that are important for all our associates. So they get the relevant training on a frequent basis. If, because our countries, and this is typical for our business, we are members of local industry associations, or if in a country there is a specific local requirements, those trainings can be adapted and modified to the local needs so that we adhere also to local law. Our countries, and we have around 550, 600 ERC officers across the globe, they are expected to develop their own local training plans. So we have the global one, but our countries, because of the different operating models, because of the different risks that they are exposed, they are expected to determine the topics that are relevant and the audiences that will receive the training. And with this, we feel we have a holistic model overall. And now I come to the second pillar. The second pillar is a kind of an in-depth knowledge database. We call it ERC Ethics, Risk and Compliance Academy. This is an electronic, or let's say a database, a forum, where we host in-depth educational elements. This could be around managed access programs, compassionate use, donations. It could be interactions with patient organizations. Really dedicated training assets that countries can use when they execute their local training programs. So basically, they have their training, and then they can leverage in a plug-and-play setup. They have global support for their local needs, in addition to other trainings that they can do also face-to-face. What we also do is we train all our executives. So just to give you a number, last year we have trained more than 110 executives across the globe around the expectation that we have as an organization, around culture and leadership. And just to echo what you said, leadership is very relevant. And here, what we sometimes miss is that leaderships, any leader has basically the responsibility. And when we talk about leadership, then we talk about good leadership. And when we talk about good leadership, then indirectly we say, okay, what is ethical leadership? So as a leader, what is expected to not only be a moral person, but also be a moral leader. And these are two distinct concepts that need to be transformed. And they will form part also of our training program. So we train our leaders. And we also, and this is probably more interesting, we have a program which is called Why Good People Do Bad Things. And this training program, it's a 3.5 hour, 4 hour training program. It's classroom and virtual, where we want to help the organization to really embed a value-based culture. And what does it mean? We aim to move with our organization from unconscious unethical to unconscious ethical. Because traditionally, and in particular I have to be very honest, also sometimes in law enforcement, there is a black and white and a very economic perspective on behavior. But we feel we need to broaden the scope and bring in insights from academia around social and behavioral science. And they tell us that even good people could have certain biases, availability biases, conformity biases, and those aspects. And we need to equip our leaders when they make decisions to do the right decisions, and education and awareness raising can help here. Let me conclude by the third pillar, which is learning beyond Novartis. We, as a multinational organization, we are responsible to participate in collective actions. And we have representatives here from Siemens who are pioneers in this area. And education and awareness raising, I think it's a great area to collaborate with the public sector, with academia, etc. So what we are doing as part of Learning Beyond Novartis, we work with key stakeholders. This could be regulators, this could be other players, in order, for instance, to strengthen healthcare outcome. But we also work with the UNODC as part of their programs to train and educate students. Because we feel we need to, similar to what the former minister said, we need to equip the next generation to make the change. The next generation will be the next executives. They will be the next senior public officials. If they do not have the intrinsic motivation and are not equipped with the right knowledge and awareness, we cannot really drive the change. So we educate, we help them. We are lecturers, for instance, in Mexico, train them so that they become, the students become ambassadors of integrity. Thank you very much indeed.
Let me now move on to Umberto Baldi of SNAM. Umberto, I think that you've come up with some quite innovative and original solutions to the problem of how to train executives.
We actually think we did. Thanks everybody for the opportunity. Thanks for the organization and for the audience for being so patient on these subjects. In the fight against corruption, the fight itself is an equation. It's got many elements. One of the elements, of course, is the repression, the enforcement, and we heard a lot about it. Another element is the prevention, which Rauno spoke about. And one pillar of prevention is education, letting people know what corruption is, why it's wrong, what should they do to avoid the pitfalls of corruption. Education in a corporation has a very specific meaning. A corporation, as you know, it's not a democracy, it's a hierarchical institution, it's an hierarchical organization. So the education starts from the top. The tone from the top is what is needed to be cascaded down to the last employee. We are the largest, we operate the largest energy infrastructure network in Europe. We are a large multinational company, and we have several employees around the world, predominantly in Italy, but also in other countries. And we deliver the normal, regular training, including the platforms that Ron was mentioning. But in time, we grew dissatisfied with regular trainings. We started noticing that regular compliance, regular training, the frontal lecture where one person speaks to other people was not very effective in conveying the message. The message sometimes was lost. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, although the content was good, the delivery was not good. The message didn't get through. And bear in mind that in a large corporate organizations, you have engineers, you have lawyers, but you also have white-collar and blue-collar workers. You have to go down to the last element of the chain, otherwise you create a weakness in the system. So we started thinking, what can we do innovatively to get the message across? And the idea came by looking at, actually, our kids. Our kids spend a lot of time playing games. And so we partnered with an international law firm, and we created a video game, a compliance video game. And we call it the e-game. And this e-game as the content is a very simplistic game. It's not the ones that you actually would like to play, but it creates a different form, a different environment in which compliance, anti-corruption specifically, matters could be delivered. And so it creates a virtual environment where you plug in, and it's very nicely done with animation and real-life hypotheticals, and you go through a series of situations, a series of rooms, in which you are faced with a situation in a very interactive way. A situation is proposed to you, put in front of you, questions are asked, and you have to provide an answer or multiple answers. And for every answer you provide, you get an immediate feedback. So it's an interactive game. If your answer is right, the feedback tells you that you're right and explains why you're right. If the answer is wrong, it tells you that you're wrong and explains why you're wrong. And you progress, and you win points, and you achieve results, and there is this gamification element which induces you in continuing, because at the end, you get some prize. It's not an economic prize, of course. You get a compliance passport, and you get stamps on your passport for every quarter that you go through. So we had a great success rate. It's an innovation. It's a simple tool. It's something that can be replicated. It's a means that we found very effective, particularly with the less intellectual elements of an organization. But we tested also on our top management. We tested on our board of directors, on our board of statutory auditors, because this new innovative compliance program also meets the requirement of the new CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Directive, and particularly the G1.3 requirement, which requires to report also on the training for the top management.
Super, thank you very much. I think one of the messages that we've received loud and clear here this morning is that that solutions have to be tailor-made, in the words of Paolo Severino, that not every solution works for every company. And on that note, I'd like to ask Claudia Amendola of Ericsson how she has gone about ensuring compliance within her organization.
Thank you for this opportunity. Ericsson is one of the world's leading information and communication technology, operating across more than 180 countries. So the business has high revenue generation potential, complex governance structure, several interactions among private and public sector components, and therefore there are corruption risks. To address such risks, the company rolled out an ethics and compliance program, and part of the program is made of training initiatives. Let me provide a powerful example. Ericsson rolled out compliance Speak Up roadshow workshops, altogether driven by market area compliance officers and group functions allegation management office. The aim of such workshops is to increase a speak-up culture by reaching leaders and middle managers in several countries, face-to-face sessions, and there is also a purpose of enhancing understanding of end-to-end allegation management process, so explaining employees how investigation process works. The benefits are several. After the workshops, Ericsson saw an increase of number of allegations submitted. And Ericsson was also able to capture local customs and practices. There are countries where employees prefer speaking in person, other countries where people prefer submitting potential allegations through the Ericsson anonymized platform. And this is important to size the number of resources that are needed locally from compliance perspective. Then another significant example comes from our 20 minutes awareness video on anti-corruption that is replacing the old-fashioned 1 hour mandatory lecture on Ericsson internal platform, so e-learning platform. The main benefit of having such shortened session is that there is more engagement by all staff, then there is a high timely completion of the trainings, and in addition, there is a great opportunity for employees to focus on knowledge and assessments inside the 20 format video that has also received international recognition together with the support of a film production agency that supported the delivery of such sessions. Then, in order to have more engagement and have integrity and transparency spread within the organization, Ericsson has in place a boost program, compliance boost program. The program allows employees that have 4 to 10 experience to join the compliance teams within 12 months of rotational roles. So they are well motivated to bring their experience, their background into compliance, and at the same time they acquire knowledge from skills, competencies from compliance officers, and they bring back such know-how inside the organization. So overall, all these initiatives have the benefits to increase understanding of Ericsson ethics and compliance program in the organization. They are initiatives that enables to have compliance ambassadors among employees that are less dependent on the compliance office. Leaders can foster integrity conversations on their own during their regular team meetings, thanks to the material, the resources they acquire. And eventually, there are the possibility to work as assurance functions in an holistic approach, so breaking down silos.
Thank you very much indeed, Claudia. Up until now, talking to our corporate representatives, we've really been looking at the supply side of the issue. I'd like to now turn more to the demand side to welcome Max Burger-Scheidlin of the International Chamber of Commerce in Austria, who has had wide experience in some of the highest risk environments for corruption. And I'd like to start by asking you, before the ICC, you were in business yourself. Have you ever yourself been corrupt, Max?
Yes, I have. After my legal studies, I started selling machinery in Sudan. And there, at that time, everybody excelled in bribing. The average bribe margin something like 20%. And as a 25-year-old, I said, well, I'll do better. I advise companies how to bribe best. That was my starting point. Half a year later, there was nothing to buy in Khartoum. I flew to Jeddah to buy furniture, God knows what. And I arrived back at the airport with 10 big cases and wanted to fly them back to Khartoum. And I had my packing list and so on, and I met a very nice customs officer who said, "Where's everything perfect, paper looks perfect, we'll do the papers." Half an hour later, he came back, invited me to a separate room, and said, "Well, you have a choice. We have a back gate at the airport. Either you pay right now, $2,000 in cash right now, or your goods will disappear through the back gate of the airport." And I, unfortunately, yes, paid. But it gave me a grudge. Looking back today, I was naive and stupid. I could have photographed my goods standing there and have a proof that I delivered them to the airport. I could have chatted to the guy and said, "Well, a week ago I had a dinner cocktail party with your big boss." I didn't do all that, so I paid up. Very soon afterwards, I realized one of my clients, a Sudanese businessman importing brick and tile machinery from Germany, Austria, and he went around the market and said, "I never bribe." And originally I thought, he must be cuckoo. How can he make business in this very corrupt country without bribing? After my experience in Jeddah, I was a bit more alert and watched him. And what he did is, as I said, the average bribe margin was 20%. Half of it, he put it in his own pocket. So he maximized profits, had higher profits than his competition. The other 10%, he invested in a fantastic after-sales service, gave out a quasi 24-hour service guarantee, at that time unheard of in Africa. At the end of a year, his competition were not that alert with after-sales services and maintenance, etc. At the end of the year, the machinery of the non-corrupt were at the standstill for maintenance, let's say, 1 week to 10 days a year. And the one of the corrupt, 2 to 3 months a year. And there, even the most corrupt people realized, well, if my machine is not working, no profits. And that has been a wake-up call for me. Now, we talked a lot about compliance and common good today, etc. Well, I have my difficulties. I mean, yes, over the last 25 years, the OECD Convention, the UN Convention did a lot of good, and we have a level playing field. Fantastic. What does it mean, compliance? The law says you must, otherwise you go to prison. If you tell that to a German or an American, he will tell you, "Yes, sir." If you tell that to a Nigerian, he will tell you, "Get lost." So, how do we get the Nigerian to perhaps reconsider his stand? I think that's the challenge we have to look at. Because
how do you do that?
I believe, unfortunately, in egoism. I believe that even if you appeal to a common good, etc., many people will not follow. Perhaps in Italy, yes, but in Nigeria. Now, I would go up to a young man like Benedict Wiedenhofer and tell him, you have another 50 to 60 years to live. Maximize your profits, maximize your income, but over 50, 60 years, with 2 conditions, which are kind of egoistic for you. Never sit in prison, and never have your income somehow blocked by a court of law, whatever. And suddenly, I mean, to make money corruptly or through fraud, etc., is very easy, very, very easy. But you keep your money for a lifetime, that's very difficult. And suddenly the whole thing of risk management comes in. And I think if you approach a person this way, they will slowly start changing, because I don't do anything against them. I had a very wonderful experience with a fellow organization for security and cooperation in Europe. And I was invited to do a presentation in their economic General Assembly. And I had my PowerPoint, my CV already sent in advance. And I came in at the coffee break just before my presentation. And the chairman, has been from Kazakhstan. And he looked at me when I introduced myself and said, "You're an interesting guy. But tell me, why are you still alive?" That was your words. Why are you still alive? And I told him, because I want to show you how to make more money without corruption. And he told me, "This is not possible." And I said, "Well, let's wait 20 minutes, hear my presentation, and let's discuss." And after my presentation, he came to me and said, "Max, very new approach, very interesting. Your approach can work in Kazakhstan." So the point is, for corrupt people, money is the key. And presently, we use a legal language and not a business language. I think we have to change, especially in the difficult countries, to a business language. We call it the commercial approach to anti-corruption. Because if I go into Nigeria, Pakistan, or wherever it is, and says, "Compliance, you must not, otherwise you go to prison," this guy's, my counterpart's flash will come up and say, "How do I feed my family? How can I survive? I lose money." Therefore, he will resist whatever he can do. That's why we have little progress over the last 20, 25 years in the difficult countries.
Max, thank you very much indeed. I'm going to cut you off at this point. I would point out that the General was listening very attentively to the first part of your talk, and I hope it doesn't have any consequences when you leave the room, if you leave the room. We only have 5 minutes left, rather less actually than 5 minutes, so I'm going to put my last question and ask you to be very, very, very brief in your replies. It's the same question that I put at the end of panel 1. What do you think is still missing? What is it that you need to help you in the battle with corruption? Starting with the professor at the end there, Emiliano.
Okay, we do believe that what is still missing is a new culture that move, even if you say, okay, common good could be not sufficient, but we do believe that the responsibility towards the common good is the key. Even if it's not sufficient, we do believe that responsibility is important, but also incentive and sanctions, of course, because people are different. We have different model of men. So for some, responsibility could be good, but a different way we intend responsibility. Not just responsibility in sense of we are responsible when we damage someone. It's not only that. We imagine a responsibility in a different way. Responsibility in terms of taking care of others.
Rauno.
I think I will do this mistake also when you ask me the next time, sorry. I would summarize it slightly different, but also building on what you said. We have the recipe. We know that leadership is critical, tone from the top is critical, culture is important, psychological safety is important. We know all of this. I think what we are missing, and there is also a project that is going on with the OECD, We do not know what we do not know, if what we are doing really drives change, is really impactful. So when we talk about those compliance programs that are preventative in their nature, we do not know what is really the effect to prevent. Because the moment when you educate, what we want to do with education, just to stay on this, we want to basically change a behavior, a decision that is in the future. So we do not know when it comes to training and education, but also to culture, if you really have changed the mindset and the behavior of the person at a particular time in the future. So what we need is instruments, measures to understand that our programs, our approaches, as a private company, but also from the public sector, in assessing compliance programs, are really right and helpful.
Thank you. Umberto.
Well, as much as in the fight against corruption, we need all the tools available, in the education against corruption, we need all the tools available. And so we need to move from a simple compliance approach to a convenience approach. We don't have to show people that you have to do this. We have to show people that it's good for you if you do this. And this moving from compliance to convenience and using all the tools available, I think the approach that Mr. Berger-Scheidlin was suggesting is an interesting one. Not every culture is the same. Within the same country, not every region and area is the same. So if you show people that it's good for you to do certain things well, not only because it's the law, we increase the reach out. And I remember in this, Aristotle, they used to say, law is reason without passion. So not just the passion of the good, but also the reason of why it's good for me.
Thank you very much. Claudia.
Governments, OECD might support further by collecting cases from industry associations, from governments, corporations, because ethics and compliance program work. But at the same time, it's important that resources are trained to adhere to local anti-corruption laws.
Thank you very much. Max, any legislative change that you would like to see? Any change in the approach by national governments or international organizations?
2 points. Point one, a couple of years ago, I've been in London at the big banking conference on compliance. And there were big banks like Hong Kong, Shanghai, Standard Chartered, etc., all with subsidiaries in quite difficult countries. And there was a lot of talk about compliance. And I asked at the end, who of you have gone out to your 5 biggest customers in, say, Uganda, and offer them a little in-house seminar on increase your profits through non-corruption? I think that is missing. Step 2, the world, OECD, UN, EU, etc., are spending, I don't know, I guess, $2-5 billion a year on anti-corruption compliance education. But what I've seen so far, it's almost always compliance. Why not add to this training, increase your profits to non-corruption as one element in the whole package?
So perhaps ironically at the end of this, considering that this is a conference on combating corruption, the conclusion would seem to be that egocentricity is central. Thank you very much indeed to our panelists. I now hand over for concluding remarks to Ambassador Raffaele Langel. Ambassador.
Thank you, thanks a lot. I mean, I won't even try to sum up the very useful and interesting discussion we had today. I mean, there are so many issues that came out from our conversations, and maybe I can be a little bit more effective if I'm short and on a more generic side. As you probably know, in January, last January, the CPI was published, I mean, the corruption index. And it is a little bit discouraging at the end of the day, because we can see from the figures that are published that the phenomenon of corruption is very much widespread, and very little progress has been recorded in the last decade. I'll try to go a little bit more into detail. I mean, more than 2/3 of countries score below 50 out of 100 in the CPI index. And more than 80% of world population live in a country where the CPI index is below 43 out of 100. This means that some 6 billion people currently live in countries where there is a quite significant, quite relevant corruption phenomenon. I mean, one of those problem countries that we spoke about a few minutes ago. When it comes to Western Europe, the situation is not encouraging. We are witnessing to a standstill or even a decline in the phenomenon of corruption, of a fight to corruption. 6 out of 31 countries, including Italy, they got a better score in the last CPI, while 8 out of 31 countries, they recorded a lower CPI if compared to the previous years. So the overall situation is not so pink, not so rosy, I will say. As you probably know, this year, companies will be involved in reporting on their environmental, social, and economic performances in line with the criteria of the European Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, which includes specific emphasis on anti-corruption. We know that a greater transparency is key for investment, and of course we encourage, as the largest Italian business association, a wider adoption of transparency methods and procedures in all associate companies. Confindustria launched this year, a few months ago indeed, a training plan for sustainability reporting, aiming at supporting the business system in adapting to new discipline and trigger change in inward organizational process, considering all ESG factors. In this very framework, Confindustria worked with great attention to the transposition in Italy of the EU Directive 2019/1937 concerning the protection of persons reporting on breaches of union law, the so-called whistleblowing discipline as well. I will cut it short. I mean, we have been discussing the whole day about the consequences of corruption. And I will come back to the very start of our discussion. I mean, John said corruption kills. And corruption kills entrepreneurship, corruption kills freedom, corruption kills people. We must never forget that people can be killed by corruption. We are not talking about markets, we are not talking about development. We are talking about the reverberation of corruption that go well beyond the perimeter of markets. We are talking about human lives. We are talking about dreams. We are talking about freedom. We are talking about psychological security and safety. I was very much struck by what Rono said about compliance bias, which can become confirmation bias in some cases, and all the side effects that this kind of attitude can have on the psychological balance of people. That's why I think we have a very strong need to stay committed in the fight against corruption. It's a battle of civilization. It's a battle for the defense of a human right, one of the basic human rights. And it's something that we have to go all together, the public sector, the private sector, each and every individual company, not only in Italy, but all over the world, because it's a shared responsibility, and we are all responsible for the implementation of it. Thanks a lot, and have a good weekend.
Thank you, Raffaele, and thank you all for your attendance and your involvement. I hope that today's proceedings have been of interest and that they have been stimulating. I hope also that you will follow through after this conference, pursuing the goals that we've set out and helping to back the initiatives that we've heard. Thank you very much indeed, and I hope you enjoy your lunch.